And now, a proper introduction. I am joined tonight by my erstwhile co-host, Melissa Hart, and by our special guest, Jessica Barksdale, who some of you may know from your courses. We are going to talk tonight about many things, like the walrus and the carpenter. And among those things will be time travel and the mixing of different genres, because that is something that Jessica is an expert at and is exemplified in her recent novel, which I've been reading, The Play's the Thing, which is kind of a time travel, alternate history romance. And I think there may even be a few other genres in there as well. So Jessica, welcome first of all, and can you tell us a little bit more about that novel and everything that may have gone into it?
Oh, well, thank you, Paul, and thank you for having me. And I just want to say what's been so gratifying about teaching at SNHU is being able to talk about genre and the different things we can do with fiction that don't have to necessarily be literary. So I'm sorry. Now, now that I've gone, can you ask the question again?
It's a very open-ended question. I just want you to kind of introduce yourselves. Tell us something about yourself. Tell us about the book that I referred to, or anything else that you may have coming down the pipe.
So I've been writing and teaching for a long time, and writing a lot of different kinds of books and poetry, and sort of have not settled like a good writer should onto one thing and done it well. I've sort of done a lot of things, maybe some of them not as well as I should have, but I really like to follow. We were talking before the lobby was let in, about something I just found on the internet today called terrestrial haste, which is that our Earth is now spinning 1.59 milliseconds faster periodically. And it's like I enjoy so much being able to take stuff that I find and use it in the way that I want to use it, as opposed to having to follow what my agent might, and I have had agents who have encouraged me to not do things. And I've had agents encourage me to do things I haven't wanted to do. And I found a way of writing what I want to write and managing to get it out into the world anyway, despite that. But the thing came from something similar. It was like a little strand in a conversation at a Christmas party, where one of my son's then girlfriend said something like, "Where does the name Jessica come from?" And I'm like, "Well, let me tell you, it Shakespeare." And then she asked, she goes, "So if he invented," she was a little tipsy, she said, "if he invented the name Jessica, what if he was haunted by all of them?" And I thought, well, what if he was haunted by all of them? And so I think as writers, we tend to get like a little brain worm, and we can't let it go. And sometimes they're little tiny phrases, or their ideas, like a plot idea, or sometimes it's like a history of someone that you carry around in your mind for years, and you finally write that story. And so I really enjoy being able to follow what I want to write, and that's why I always encourage people to have day jobs. Because who knows what will happen, and it's just really fun to be able to play with all the ideas.
Do you think that genre fiction offers you more of an opportunity to do that than, say, if you were trying to write more, I don't know, mainstream literary fiction?
I do. I feel I just had a story come in second place. It's coming out in Story Quarterly, which is very literary.
Mm-hmm.
But this story is about a woman who decides that she wants to go and cryogenesis during the pandemic. She's had it. She's done. She's going to freeze herself. And they say it's for 75 years, and I won't give away the end of it. But I thought during the heat or the lack of heat of the pandemic, somewhere deep in 2020, I thought, is this endurable? Must one live through this? And then I thought of something I heard a long time ago, and I don't know if it's true, but a friend of mine's mother told me that there used to be a grief therapy where they would basically sedate a person for a long period of time, like maybe a month, so that they could undergo their grief while unconscious.
Wow.
And I was like, so I put the two ideas kind of together. It's like so she basically says in the story, she says goodbye to her husband, and she makes all her plans, and it's really not it isn't our pandemic. It's a pandemic in a few years. And she basically says, and she goes off to Portland is where I put the facility. And the story goes on, but it's a good story. It's written in the literary style, but I got some feedback from some nice editors at nice journals saying, we really like this. We really think it's great, but it's just a little too science speculative for our tastes.
Interesting.
And please feel free to submit some of your best work. I'm like, well, that's the best work I have right now. I hate that comment. So I just didn't give up on it though. But to answer your question, yes, literary markets are not quite as open. Some are and some aren't. It's opened up a bit. Famous writers will sort of dip down and write a werewolf story, or they'll dip down and do some vampires. But I do think it's changing so that there's more acceptance of some of these tropes that we love. We love a good romance vampire time travel story. I mean, most of us.
Well, I'm definitely enjoying the plays the thing. It's let's talk a little bit about how you mesh all the genres together. Tell me about that. Like, how do you decide on the proper balance, the recipe, so to speak, for your story? You don't want to add too much of the romance, perhaps, or you don't want to overpower it with science fiction. So how do you find the right balance for this particular story?
I came at it in a weird way. I had to use the time travel trope to get my character there. And my favorite, I used all my experience as teaching Shakespeare to write the beginning of it, because this is kind of a dream. This is a fangirl moment, right? I'm in Shakespeare's room finally. What do I get to say to him? What do I get to learn about him? What do I get to know? But I had to get him there. And so I've read a lot of time travel books, and I decided that I would so in terms of that rule, or I wasn't going to go overboard with explaining the time travel. I would go at it as if being my character. She doesn't know how she got there, and really I didn't either. Right.
And in a way, it doesn't matter.
Right. Like there wasn't a key. There was no, nothing she had to touch. People kept telling me, well, what's the object? I go, I don't know. She's just there. So but I figured I'd figure it out later, and just keep writing. I couldn't have it be a romance per se. I couldn't have all the tropes of a romance, because Shakespeare has to stay in his time, and he has to do what he needs to do.
You're bound by history.
I'm bound by history. So that was kind of a good rule. That was a kind of a good recipe. And then I also, I've written romances, and I adore them in some ways, but I didn't want to have to follow along with, enemies to friends. There's a little bit of that in there, but it ends quickly, so I was able to sort of move through what I knew to create it. And then whenever someone said, oh, you're info dumping, there's the historical fiction part, pull it out. Or if a number of people said, how did she get there? Explain the time travel. Okay, maybe I need to go a little bit more into that trope and work that. And if is it, oh, it's too feminist at the end, well, then maybe I played around with some of those ideas too. So I guess my idea of the recipe is that readers are the recipe. So my writing group, my beta readers, they really helped me tune what I was doing with the story.
That's amazing. That's fascinating. Um,
Can I ask a
so
question?
please jump in.
I'm curious about how poetry informs your prose.
That is such a good question. And I think it informs, it always informs my prose. I started as a poet. And I took a lot of classes. I just was able, I took classes from Diane DePrima in the Bay Area. I took classes from a lot of very famous, I was living at the time when I started writing, in the late 80s, early 90s, after I got out of college, and had my kids, I felt like, okay, now maybe I can start writing. I thought, okay, I have all these people available to me. So my toolbox, before I even started writing prose, I had just all sorts of, description, specificity, metaphor, line, the importance of the line in every word. It's helped me so much as a writer when I think about, I have a thing against repetition. I don't know if it drives you guys crazy, but it drives me insane. So in my own writing and in others. So poetry, I think, sort of keyed me into the importance of the line, but then of the sentence and of the paragraph. It also trained me to read aloud. So, because, poets are all, poems are short. You can go to a lot of readings. People will listen to you for 2 minutes and that's fine. But I got into the habit of reading my stuff aloud. Mm-hmm. So I can hear my repetition or my broken sentences but I continue, I just keep, I'm right now doing a poetry writing workshop with Sylvia. It's online. It comes to me every day. I kind of tense every morning. I have to open my prompt. Like, what am I going to have to do? But I do this constantly. It keeps me just energized. And then I'll find something like terrestrial haste in a prompt. And I'm like, oh, this is a story. Or a poem in the prompt, like, will become a prose piece, and it will become a flash fiction, which can become a short story. So there's opportunities to take poetry other directions. I can take it into the prose world very easily. I always recommend to my students in the writing classes to take a poetry class. Fiction writers are kind of awful about poetry too. They go, oh, it's poetry. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I just know I can't do poetry. And it's like, of course you can. It's so great.
Do you write poetry, Melissa?
No, I did as an undergrad. That was my focus when I was getting a degree in literature. I think it's one of the best classes that a prose writer can take, though, for all the reasons Jessica just described: economy of language and attention to a specific word, and the rhythm and the meter and all of that, I think, enhances prose so much. But no, I don't write poetry.
I have to agree, though.
Did it stop, or do you just not go there? Do you just go right to prose?
Yeah, I just go right to prose.
I wonder how many fiction writers like me are kind of failed poets, because I started and I wanted to be a poet when I was all through college. I wanted to be a poet, and then I met some real poets, and I realized I'm not a poet, but I still have a love of words, a love of language, and I love, I love to write. I love to write particular kinds of fiction, specifically speculative fiction. I didn't realize until well into my college years that that was like a viable way of pursuing a literary ambition, right? Just like you were talking about earlier, Jessica, the idea that maybe literary journals are still a little bit gun shy or prejudiced against speculative fiction.
Except because the world is, now that the big five are becoming the big four, and then, that we have all these amazing indie publishers, I see daily on like Submittable, we need horror poems. We need speculative fiction poems. So there is a genre, there is a need and a desire for genre poetry. I don't write genre poetry. I mean, I don't really, okay, I'm sure weird things have happened in my poems, but I've never written I don't have vampires, or I did write one about Frankenstein. I will say that. But, I think I was just thinking, what a great class. Poetry for fiction writers. And it would be just a focus on everything Melissa said, and how to then pull that into your writing genre, literary or not. And because I think what I find sometimes is, teaching as I do at these, where people are writing novels, that I think a lot of folks think they can focus on the sentence later. Like, I'm writing the story, I'm just going to get it down, I'm going to get everything in place, and I'm going to worry about the sentences. But my feeling is that the sentence is the engine of everything. And if your sentences aren't firing, then your novel's not going to fire. Your novel is not going to fire if you don't have that attention. But I just keep banging my drum.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting, because so many of in our MFA, we try to give students access to a lot of different resources, a lot of different approaches, philosophies about how to write a novel.
Right.
Some of them espouse the idea of just get it out.
Yeah.
Just get it out as fast and as unedited as you can. But it sounds as though you might have a disagreement with that approach.
I don't have a disagreement really with that approach. But sometimes I think it would be better if everyone had a better command of the sentence before they decided to do it. How's that? So
yep.
Knowing comma splices and fragments and, that kind of thing. So if everyone had a clear idea of the sentence, and then my novel that's coming out next February, this coming February 2023, I really did write it and revise it and get it out and sold in 6 months. So I did, but it was one of those books that had been thinking about for a decade. It was in there, and so I did do just that thing. I sat down every day and I wrote the novel.
But it had gestated for a considerable period of time. It was ready to be born.
Yeah, parts of it were still unknown, but it was churning. It was churning. Yep. So I do believe in just getting it out. But then it would be so great if people were left with something that was a little bit easy, that then the person didn't have to work on plot issues as well as those tinier, the sentence issues.
So let me ask you, where would a student go who wanted to achieve more control over or knowledge of or mastery of their work on a sentence level? How would they do that?
Well, I can tell you. And this is cross-pollination here, but I developed a class for UCLA Extension called Clear and Descriptive Writing. Cool. And I can't even tell you who signed up for that class. I've had UCLA professors. I'm kind of scared to think about it. I have 2 filmmakers in my class. I have one guy who's writing a self-help book based on his journey as this sort of, I haven't Googled him because I'm scared to, but we did things where like we learned how to write different kinds of sentences. And now we're working on the paragraphs and how to put them together. So if UCLA is offering a class like that, there are those classes out there, probably at community colleges, there are, or at community centers. I'm sure there are classes on sentences, or there are books like the kinds that I'm using where you could just say, I'm going to spend 2 weeks thinking about appositives. If your readers keep telling you, this is a great idea, I love your characters, it's a great setting, but the writing is a little problematic, this might be a class to take.
How did each of you, I'm going to start with you, Melissa, how did you gain control of your writing on that level, on a sentence level, on a paragraph level? Was it just something that sort of occurred through repetition and practice and doing your writing as an apprentice and then a journeyman and then a professional writer?
Yeah, I would say it was a product of writing in multiple genres for multiple years. And also, I think I gained control by teaching writing.
Interesting.
I started out as a grammar teacher at community college decades ago. And I think I didn't get a good grammar education in high school or college. So having to be the expert on that really made me think about grammar and sentence structure and, when to learn the rules and when to break the rules for effect. So it was a combination of all of that. And reading constantly.
Yeah. Because those are our real teachers. That's what I've found anyway.
Yeah. And I tend to read with a pen in my hand. I was at Powell's the other day, the big bookstore in Portland, and somebody was staring at me because I took a pen to this paperback I just bought, and I was underlining and writing in the margins, and it was like they were just so horrified that I would write in a book, but I'm using it as a mentor text. Pick apart and find out how the author is doing what she's doing and how I can do it as well.
What book was that?
Oh, it's creative nonfiction. It's Susan Orlean, one of her books of essays.
She's wonderful.
Yeah, she's terrific.
Yeah. And what about you, Jessica? How did you gain that mastery that is evidenced in your own work?
Well, thank you. What Melissa said, when I started as an adjunct at the community college I eventually was tenured at, they gave me, my first classes were basic sentence, grammar rules, and spelling. And they had a learning center. That's what they called it then. And going over and over and over and over all those rules, because I did take a grammar class in my first master's degree, and it was so hard because we are not taught the grammar rules necessarily. I've been taking Italian for years, and I know the grammar rules and as I'm thinking about them in Italian, I'm going back and thinking about them in English, but I'm old now. And when I was young, it was just like, here's a sentence, and I was a reader. So when people started talking about grammar, I would almost wave my hands. It's like, I understand grammar. I'm a reader. I know it. But teaching grammar, teaching sentence structure, thinking about punctuation, which I really like to do.
Because that's the poet part of you.
To comma or not to comma? What about you, Paul?
Oh gosh, no, I would say exactly the same thing. From reading a lot, like probably many people who are drawn to writing. I feel like I had an instinctive ear that was quite accurate, but I would never really understand the logic or the system behind what sounded good to my ear. So I could do fairly well, like in grammar classes in high school, without really understanding anything, because I just knew when something was wrong and I knew when something was right. But then becoming a writing instructor and having to explain to a student why what they had written, why what they had written was not communicating what they wanted to communicate. The image in their mind was not being successfully transferred onto paper. And the reason was because of syntax,
Right.
or punctuation, a lack of commas, the lack or presence of a comma can destroy a sentence. It can destroy a story. It seems weird that such a small thing could have such a profound effect, but I really honestly do believe that. I've seen it so often. So I think, in common with you, Melissa, like teaching it, and Jessica, teaching it really, really helped me. And I feel like so many of our students have this idea, which I completely understand and sympathize with, that I'm going to get my idea, I'm going to get my story out, and I'll leave it to the copy editors later or the editor to, impose a kind of grammatical order or syntactical order on my story. And what I try to get across is, like, you can't really tell your story effectively in a way that does your story justice until you have a certain degree of expertise in these areas. And you don't have to be like a grammar, whiz about it. I found that a high school level of grammar and syntax, sentence structure, and so on, really all that is necessary to write at a very high level, to write fiction at a very high level.
I can't even imagine what a copy edited return manuscript would look like with grammar problems or punctuation problems, because usually there's questions about things that, with my first novel, I was stunned to realize I'd been spelling Fruit Loops wrong my entire life. So
how were you spelling Fruit Loops?
I think I spelled it the correct way, like FRUIT. LOOPS. Fruit Loops is FROOT.
Oh.
Fruit Loops. So we could have two O's with both words,
Wow.
right?
Oh.
But there's somebody. So when I got that book back, and it wasn't about, the problems weren't grammatic. They were related to other things, or this. And I just went, wow, this is a lot to deal with. Yeah, and this idea that, I just read an article from it was an editor of a literary journal, and it's on one of my listservs. I get all these articles, but basically the editor said, we will pick a story we like less if it's correct than a story that we like more that is problematic.
I'm a little surprised to hear that, to be honest.
Well, they don't have time.
Yeah.
They do not have time to take the story that maybe is rife with problems, comma splices, whatever. They don't have the time to edit it. They don't have the time to interact with the writer about how to fix it, the back and forth. They're on a deadline. They have no staff. They're not even being paid, let's say. One person's being paid in that whole journal. The rest are interns and volunteers.
Yeah.
So they don't have time to do that. So if you think someone's going to do it for you, it's in an alternate universe that I wish we lived in sometimes, right? Or you can pay, or you can write your novel, get that thing down, and then pay for somebody to fix it for you.
And that's something you should do if you're self-publishing.
Right. If you're self-publishing, you absolutely should hire a copy. You probably might even hire a developmental editor at that point, and then someone who will copy edit your.
Let me just jump in here, because I think it would be interesting and useful, educational, to talk a little bit about the difference between a developmental editor, a copy editor, and a proofreader.
Yeah, but what do you think?
What do I think?
You want me to? I can tell you.
I'm asking you.
Okay, I can absolutely talk about that. Probably a lot too much, but so if you're writing a novel that you're going to self-publish, and it's your first novel, and you've never written a novel before, but you know you're going to self-publish it, and you've taken it to your writing group and your beta readers, and they've given you the commentary, but you should probably then take that thing, which I would guarantee you, if it's your first novel, is a little bit of a hot mess. I would assume, right? Your beta reader is probably your sister and your mom. And people tell me this all the time. Well, my mom read it and she loved it. And I'm like, oh no. Because my mom, of course, read my first novel too, right? So a developmental writer will help you arc your way, see if your story has an arc, if the characters are developed, if the setting is clear, if maybe the story needs to be rearranged, if the core elements of theme, plot, and character are working. And if they're not working, then that editor will help you, manipulate all of that into a fixable way. The developmental editor will, and sometimes developmental editors will also say, I will also reread this and then do a copy edit on that. So that would be going through and finding all the errors. So let's say you didn't take the high school grammar class and you just had a great idea. This could be extensive of all the punctuation, the sentence structure, all the fragments, and some fragments are okay, but the comma splices, the dialogue format. Maybe you wrote a whole book without dialogue. Whoops, I summarized it all. Okay, so maybe writing some dialogue and how to punctuate that. And then getting all of that and giving you help with like the rules, giving you handouts, showing you sources online, talking about MLA and all that stuff.
There's kind of an educational aspect to copy editing, isn't it?
Oh, that is a whole class and program in and of itself, right? How to copy edit. And they have a special language that you might not even understand when you get your back. Okay, I'm so old that when I first got it, I had the blue pencil. I had blue pencil.
Mine was red, but yep. Absolutely.
You had red. As a teacher, when I had the hard copy, I never used red. It's a scary color, isn't it?
Scary. Yes, absolutely.
And then proofreading is just proofing, like it's almost like you can put on a pair of glasses that are proofreading glasses and you sort of scan and you're looking for the best way to do that, apparently, is to read things backwards. I don't know how much you'd have to pay someone for that.
I've done it. I mean, I've done all. I've in my freelance work, I have done all of those things and been all of those people. I find developmental editing was incredibly satisfying on a kind of like a high level, because you're talking about structure. A lot of what you're doing is talking about structure. You're talking about themes, all the kind of big elements of craft. Copy editing is interesting if you're a writer, because you get to look stuff up. You get to learn new things. You follow. You make sure that the writer has done their homework, and if they haven't done it, you have to do it for them. Basically.
Yes.
And then proofreading was my least favorite, because it's just a drag. And reading stuff backwards is a good way to do that. But who wants to do that? But thank God for proofreaders. I mean, don't get me wrong.
No,
just amazing people. And I thank God for all of these roles in the literary, ecosystem.
Well, and we're writing in with different technology. When I started, of course, there was no grammar or spell check, and now grammar and spell check are they're integrated into Word.
But is that good or bad? I mean, what do you think of? I mean, obviously, spell check is going to miss a lot of stuff. Any kind of like homophone is going to be like completely missed by a spell check program. But even Grammarly, I feel is harmful to a writer, because I think it catches things that are not relevant to a writer's approach to language, to the
That's
flow, the
interesting.
rhythm of language, and it's going to apply rules in a very black and white way that you know a writer cannot apply them that way. I mean, you obviously want to know the rules of grammar and the rules of punctuation, but at the same time, there has to be more leeway in your work. At least that's what I've found. And writers that kind of rely on Grammarly to do the work for them, rather than buying a book like Dreyer's English, for example, and reading it and rereading it and studying it and learning from it. Their work isn't natural. It doesn't come across with a natural flow.
So maybe there's a difference if you use spell and grammar check if you have a command of the language, so that you can just notice that you left a comma out, you know, that it's something. But if you don't know the rules, then maybe you just will accept everything that happens on the page because you think that the program knows best.
Well, that's exactly
Yeah.
the problem, I think.
Yeah.
The program does not know best.
No, the program does not know best, and I leave mine on, and sometimes I look and I go, this is not. It's missing a lot of things that I can spot, and it's picking up stuff that it doesn't know what I'm doing. You know, it's giving the double blue underline, that little dastardly grammar thing, and for me, I love it. Do you turn yours off? Do you turn it
Yes.
off?
Yes, I
turn
don't
it
have it
off.
on. I never turn it on. In
You've
fact,
never turned it on.
no, I don't use it at all.
Not even at the very end.
I do use spell check at the very end, but I never use Grammarly for
I don't
anything.
either.
Well, I don't think I use Grammarly. Is that in Word? Is that what's in Word now?
Well, Word has like a grammar checker, but I don't
Yeah.
use that. I never use that.
So interesting. It's like skiing without a helmet.
I don't know about that. I find like it's like having like a putting the word grammar checker on at any point in when I'm writing something. It's like having a pedant who thinks they know everything, but in reality knows nothing. And they're constantly saying, oh, is that right? Oh, that's wrong. Oh, think about that. You need a comma there. Oh, you're using this word incorrectly. And it's infuriating. So I just turn it off.
Oh, you know, I'll try it tomorrow when I write my poem and see what happens when I get my prompt first thing.
How could you possibly use a grammar checker for a poem?
Well, I don't. Okay, here's the thing. I don't really pay too much attention to it. You know, I'll write everything, and then one time I remember I think it was maybe my 5th novel. I had it on, but I wasn't paying any attention to it, and it stopped actually letting me write because I had so many errors. I write pretty messy, you know.
Yeah.
I write. But I just let it do its thing, and I keep doing my thing. And then at the end, I go, oh boy, I'm typing terribly today. But I don't take it personally. But I do wish people weren't relying on such like Grammarly for their information. Interesting. You gave me something to think about. I'm feeling bad about myself right now.
Oh, don't feel bad about yourself. Come on.
I have a question that I think people here might love an answer to, if you don't mind. What do you think about finding an agent or publishing with a small or mid-sized press versus doing an indie publishing endeavor?
Great question.
That is such a good question. So my dogs are having a standoff at the OK Corral down here.
I could
so if I disappear.
I saw one ear, but I couldn't see the rest of the dog.
Yeah, they're just circling each other. So I've had all of the above, right? I have sort of an Uber agent who's interested in one thing, but she's more of a platform based agent. have far away from her. And really, I've been working extensively with indie publishers and just sort of doing my own thing. I learned how to do some foreign rights all by myself. When she finally split off, and I think in the beginning, when I started writing, I am so glad I've had 4 agents, and I'm so glad that I had my first agent. Not really my second, third, or fourth. Because but my first agent, she taught me a lot. She taught me about what I didn't know. I thought I would just send her a book and then something would magically happen. And then I realized that just because she accepted me, didn't mean anything. It meant that my book then had to go out to submission to editors who would then do the same thing to me that other agents had done by rejecting my book. I was like, oh, I didn't know that happened. I thought agents were magical creatures that, where they were fairies from another realm that would give me what I wanted. And then when that agent left, after I learning a lot, I got a very fancy agent at a very fancy agency who really didn't care too much about what I was doing at all and pushed me into a place. And I willingly followed where he said I should go, but I didn't really want to, but I did it because he was a magical agent working at a magical agency. And I thought I would become magic if I did what he said. So, and then just going through some interesting situations with an agent landing an indie publisher. And I sort of thought, I think I can do that on my own. And I don't have to pay anybody anything because now I've learned a lot. And at this stage in the game, I've developed relationships with editors and publishers and journals and people who are interested in doing things working with me. But I think it's better that I'm at the stage I am now doing some of this stuff rather than at the beginning when I didn't know what I was doing. And I was not young. I was just immature or ignorant of what it meant to be in the publishing game. So I think, I have a student right now, a former student, and she's gone off into the stratosphere. Her name's Julie Clark, and she writes these kind of very tense thriller type things that time is of an essence. And she's actually coming to my book group via Zoom tomorrow because someone picked her book. I go, Julie. And so she's going to Zoom in. But she waited. I mean, she wasn't till 45, but she got an agent who then helped her do that. It was her first novel. And she'd done kind of the literary thing where she's sending out short stories and getting rejected by journals. So she needed that person to really help her. So a good agent is invaluable, can really teach you. But it's possible to survive on your own in the wilds if you do a lot of research and studying and do your homework and go to conferences and get an MFA and learn from your teachers and take it out there.
There's a question in the chat that I think is a good follow-up to that. This is from Janae, and they ask, besides the small list on Query Tracker, what's a good way to find small indie publishers that accept unagented submissions?
This is a great question. And I tell my students about I think for one, submittable.com it's a big, giant, overarching submissions site. So, and indie publishers will put their what they want up there, and submittable. So many publishers, big and small, indie big and indie small, and sometimes even big, have a submittable port that they use. So in the top left-hand corner of submittable is something, it says discover. Click on discover. write in the search bar, write in what you have. Horror novel, fantasy novel, coming of age novel, and click. And you will be surprised how many indie publishers will be there ready to take your submission for a contest or for a fee. Sometimes they don't even charge. And you can get your novel out there. One thing that, especially if it's free, one thing that's really great about submitting your novel is that you can get a response to your novel. Like, so you might get if you get a response that says, thank you for your submission. We wish you well with your writing journey. You will know that your novel is maybe not working very well. You may get a tiny hint. And then if you get something like that a couple of times, you might be spurred to getting a developmental or a copy editor or getting a read from somebody. If you get a long personalized letter from an editor who says, we were really on the fence about this, but, we really like work that's a little more experimental than what you have, then you know that your novel is firing. Maybe that would inspire you to write a couple queries to agents. To say, you might get some hints. There's also a site called newpages.com. New Pages does, it isn't as extensive, but it lists a lot of contests, book, poem, essay, all genres. You can find it there. And duotrope.com is another one. For $5 a month, you can join. You get the skinny on a lot of agents are also on Duotrope. So the agents have a page. And if you want to go more back toward, you can go to publishersmarketplace.com. Publishers Marketplace lists these agents, and so you can start figuring out what your novel's doing, where your novel should best go. If you get a lot of offers, suddenly you sent out your novel 3 times, 3 indie publishers decide they need to have your novel, you might need to say to yourself, maybe I should go up one more step here and spend 3 months trying to get an agent and see what happens. So yeah.
I mean, that to me, that would be the time to reach out to an agent.
Right.
Absolutely.
They're really, really important.
So
you can do it on your own.
You mentioned a lot of, you mentioned contests, you mentioned opportunities to submit with a fee. I know this is a somewhat controversial topic among writers, especially in genre fiction. Like in speculative fiction, there's that old saying that money flows to the writer. The writer does not pay, people pay the writer. And that's gospel in the speculative fiction world, but that is not necessarily gospel in the literary fiction world or in the romance fiction world, for example. So and this is another question I would direct to both of you, like, where do you come down on the idea of should writers pay to enter a contest? Should they pay a submission fee? Is it fair? Is it worthwhile? And the dogs have weighed in, obviously.
Dogs say no.
Did you hear that? Those are my neighbor's dogs.
Oh, really? Wow.
I should shut my door. You can spend a lot of money on contests and submission fees. I'm not sure that you need to. I don't know. I'm noticing a lot more editors waiving those fees if people are in an MFA program or they're from a marginalized demographic. But I mean, how much does it cost now to submit a manuscript on Submittable? I heard $5. Is that true? That adds up.
5 would be they're anywhere from free to a very big contest if you're talking about like Grey Wolf or Saraband or one of the sort of very literary high stakes, University of Georgia, the Catherine Porter Award, they can be $20 or $25 for a contest.
Yeah.
Manuscripts run anywhere from $2 to I mean, just sending in something. So you're saying you think it's too much?
I just think in terms of our students who are in this program and maybe working 1 or 2 jobs,
Sure.
It adds up. It adds up. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be a real bar to writers like our students who are like you point out,
Melissa, paying for an MFA at this very moment.
Among other things, and then they have this other, it's kind of an obstacle in a way that's like, it's favoring some writers over other writers, basically.
Well, here's what you can do. You can go to Submittable, hit discover, and write in no fee.
Yeah.
And hundreds of opportunities show up.
Yeah.
So usually what you find is those journals or publishers have some kind of endowment, or they're connected with a university, and so if you don't have the funds, do that, and I think you can get a feel. The others, if you are, so I remember one time my agent, again, this is in the prehistoric time, she asked me for 17 copies of my novel. She said, you need to send me 17 copies so I can submit your novel. And by the time I was done going to Kinko's, buying the box,
True, that was expensive,
and then submitting my novel. So I spent, $80 sending this, and eventually, yes, I made that money back, but I might not have.
Yeah.
And I think, so if you win a big contest, or your novel is published by a reputable indie publisher who will then actually get you out there, and something happens, it can pay off. And you can get reviewed. You can get a teaching job with a nice indie published novel that has been well reviewed. And you are now viable in the working world. And so, yeah, you spent $20 on a contest. Oh, well, now you have a teaching job.
Yeah.
So I know that might be rare, but I don't think that's necessarily a rare thing that has happened. People go viral in some way and it pays off. How do you know? So start with a no fee. And then when you get your first job, start paying $2. So the money really doesn't flow to the writer, even if, and if you get paid a lot of money all the time, then the money is, but the money's really flowing in the top, in the big five to the big five to the, right. So I don't know if I believe that mantra. It sounds really firm and strong, though. I wish it were true.
Well, certainly that's the ideal situation that we all hope for.
But what is that? You have to spend money to make money.
Yeah. Well, that's, in the self-publishing world, there's no question that that's the case, right? Because you do have to spend the money. You have to purchase all of the services that a traditional publisher would provide for you and more. And actually, even in the traditional publishing these days, you have to purchase a lot of stuff yourself.
Yes, you do.
You can't rely on a traditional publisher to successfully market your book, for example.
Exactly.
I mean, they will have some kind of marketing plan for you, and great, but you really have to go the extra mile yourself, and you have to shell out some money and do some hard work.
The publicity department, they do have a great marketing arm, like Penguin Random House. I mean, it's like they're in every store. It just naturally flows. But if you're a mid-list type of person, they're not going to get a fantastic book tour going for you and send you all over the world.
No,
if you
not going to happen.
No, it's not. So I don't know. I feel maybe I'm just Well, I don't know. I wish it was a different writing world than it is, but I think that there are enough contests and publishers willing to accept manuscripts that it's probably our students can find a way until there's a way to do more.
Mhm. I'm gonna, since we're kind of running down to the last moments of our chat, I wanted to invite our audience to once again ask any questions that you might have for Jessica or Melissa or me. Just type them in the chat. We're happy to answer almost everything. There's some secrets that we have to keep. Secrets of the
If I
trade.
had one, I really would tell you. I feel like I've written everything down.
What kind of dog is that?
This is is that Marcel? Yes, that's Marcel, and he is a Pyrenean Shepherd. And that's his chair. That's where he does his thing.
Okay.
I'm sorry you had to see that. I should have blocked it. Yeah. He loves that chair. I mean.
There
Oh, now I see him there. Yeah, that's go. Look at his tail wagging. That's great.
Beautiful. Wow.
Oh, they're intense dogs. This breed. I don't recommend them for anyone. I love them, but my God, it's from morning until they go into their crates at night. It's a constant walking outdoor. What can we do? What's next? What's going to happen now? It's like nothing's going to happen.
Oh, there we go. Okay, so what do you look for in an indie publisher to tell if they're reputable?
Great question.
Oh, so I have written about this because I have worked with one indie publisher who was not reputable. And I wrote a media. I sort of don't know if I should shame the publisher. Should I shame? Should I shame?
I think a little shame can be a healthy thing, but I'll leave it to you.
Okay, so and it's a book I really love, and they did publish it, and it worked out. It's Urban Farmhouse Press, and they had a great website. And I actually wrote to one of the things you can do. You can write to one of the authors who have been published by the indie press and ask a question. Now, I happen to know this writer, and she told me her experience. And she actually was a student. She taught at UC Riverside and was a student of mine at UCLA. And I thought, okay, she knows. Well, weird things started happening. The pub date kept moving. I never got the proofs. You know, stuff wasn't right, but it finally sort of got right, and it happened, and it never was good. It was never good. He actually never gave me all my advance.
Oh, that's terrible.
Yeah. So my son-in-law is a lawyer. I got out of my contract. I was able to self-publish the Kindle version and take back everything, but I wrote about it on Medium. I wrote a long article, and I cannot tell you how many people have contacted me from that one article. And writers want to be published so badly. They want it, they need it. They don't want to hurt, they don't want to cause waves. And so they never write their comments in the comment. They just write me a message. So if you want to know, you write to more than one writer. Don't write to someone you know who's been published. Write to somebody you don't know who's been published by that press. Ask them, and I can guarantee you that writer will write you back. So what happened was 3 or 4 other writers and I found each other online. We banded together. One person wrote to Duotrope, one person wrote to New Pages, we wrote to all these people to explain what had happened to us. And Urban Farmhouse Press was canceled a little bit, but not quite. This one guy who wrote to me last week said he was accepted by them 4 years ago, never heard from them, and got a rejection letter a form rejection letter from him the week before. So and Google the heck out of the press. So I'm working with somebody right now who I will not shame. I'm working with a guy named Bill Burleson from Flexible Press. And I mean, my God, he accepted my manuscript. We were on a Zoom the next day. Every single thing he said he was going to do, he did. He's got the back copy, the cover's going. He gave me all these options, just like a publisher should.
Mhm.
And at AWP, he took us all out to dinner. I'm like, oh my God, I don't have to shame him on, anywhere. So, ask around.
Yeah, that's great advice. And that's where we're going to have to end it for tonight.
Okay, well, thank you for letting me just blather on.
This was a really great episode of the chat. I think there was a lot of really useful information that came up here, and I certainly have enjoyed it. And I enjoyed meeting your dog.
Oh, well,
Yes,
Marcel will be talking about you for days. He knows it. He's been staring. You didn't know, but he was really staring. Melissa, it was great to meet you in person, sort of in person.
Yeah, you as well. I'll see you maybe in Portland.
Yeah, maybe we can have a bookstore coffee date.
There you go.
To me.
Wireside chat, bringing writers together. That's our
Thank
motto.
you. Yeah, there you go.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.